episode 82 of Late Night Linux, recorded on the 3rd of February 2020. I'm Joe, and with me are Phelim.
Good evening.
Graham.
Hello.
And Will.
Bonjour.
Oh, sacre bleu. Yes, we've now left the European Union. We're in the transition period, and it's already really, really shit. But what are you going to do?
I've been very tired marking out all the UK out of my €50 notes.
I can't believe that Phelim is in the EU and we're not. It's not fair.
Yes, life is harsh.
Yeah, well, I'm coming over there in the summer, maybe to stay for good. We'll have to see. Anyway, so we have to start with an announcement, and that is that I am an idiot. And FOSS Talk Live 2020 will not be on the previous date. It will be on the 20th of June, and it really will be on that date this time. I made something of an error, beyond my control, all that excuses. It was my fault. And so, yes, I'm an idiot. 20th of June, at the Harrison, near King's Cross. So if you have booked anything that's non-refundable, then please let me know. latenightlinux.com/contact.
And Joe will pay it off.
No, I will not pay it off. But I was thinking, if anyone really booked it that far in advance and you can't get a refund, then I'll at least hang out with you in the pub. That's your consolation prize. So let me know. Don't be booking things just to do that.
It is the Queen's birthday.
It is, yes. But I'm not even going to mention that previous date. That previous date is wrong. So it's the 20th of June. So yes, tickets and whatnot will be coming shortly when I have time, and I'll update the website. But in the meantime, just follow FOSS_talk on Twitter. That's the best way to get updates on that. So let's start with some news then. And first up, a post about the PinePhone from Lucas, which clarifies quite how free it is. And it turns out it's freer than some people thought.
So I've missed this. Was there a big contentious issue with what parts of the phone were free and which parts weren't free? Because we all know it's an incredibly difficult problem to crack with so many parts, the Bluetooth, the Wi-Fi, the radios, those parts in particular relying on firmware that are closed.
Well, I don't want to drag up drama, but there was an article on a well-known site about a different phone, and it kind of, as a throwaway line, lumped in the PinePhone with other Android phones, saying that they're just full of blobs. And that's kind of was the last straw. I think that Pine had been wanting to set the record straight on this for a while, and this post was the result of it. But I think it all worked out fine with the person who wrote the original article. That was removed. And I think the reference to that article was removed from this thing that we're going to link to on the Pine64 blog. But the bottom line is that it is reasonably free. There's a couple of blobs for the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, some optional proprietary firmware as well. But compared to most Android phones, it is incredibly freedom-loving.
And the modem runs its own thing as well, but you don't have to actually. It doesn't have access to memory. Essentially, is the main important part of it. So, I mean, to me, it looks pretty good. I mean, it's almost like your laptop, where essentially, if you want your wireless to work, you do probably have to have that firmware installed, especially if it's been certified. So, I think this is kind of as close as you could get, realistically speaking, especially in the US. Unless
it's been certified by the FSF, like that one, I think it was an N card or something that they certified over the last couple of weeks, which we've somewhat gone past N at this point, haven't we? We've had like AC and now Wi-Fi 6. So yeah, it's very hard to get completely free software on these things. But yeah, the PinePhone is looking good. I still haven't got mine. I've got tracking for it, but it turns out you were right, Phelim. The tracking is shit. It was 2 weeks ago, I think, that I got this notification, an email and a text saying that here's your tracking, and then the tracking just hasn't changed since then. So it'll turn up as and when it turns up, I suppose. But it's not the only bit of news from Pine. They were at FOSDEM at the weekend, just gone, and they had, I think it's a prototype. It's not a finished board, but it's what they're calling the Hard Rock 64, which has got the same system on a chip as the Rock Pro 64, which is the bigger board. But this one doesn't have the PCIe slot, but it does have Wi-Fi built in. And it is suspiciously priced at $35, $45, and $55 for the 1 gigabyte, 2 gigabyte, and 4 gigabyte versions in terms of RAM. somewhat priced like the Raspberry Pis.
Yes, looks very similar to the Raspberry Pi and has an eMMC socket too, which is very cool.
Explain to us, people, what that means.
eMMC is much better for long-term storage on these devices than the SD card you have to use on the Raspberry Pi.
Yeah, it's not as fast as a proper SSD, like a SATA or NVMe one, but it is much better than SD card. So, yes, it's looking pretty cool. And it's clearly supposed to take on the Raspberry Pi 4. Whether it'll have the same software ecosystem, I don't know. I mean, Raspbian is really mature at this point. Whether it's with a GUI or without, you know that Raspbian's going to be really good on a Pi.
It's interesting about the pricing because, as you say, the software ecosystem is going to be less mature than the Raspberry Pi, yet they're pitching it at exactly the same price as the Raspberry Pi. I think if they want to pick up serious numbers, they should be pitching it cheaper than the Raspberry Pi. But that said, I'm pretty sure that Ubuntu server is going to run on this thing just fine in 64-bit mode. And then you've got access to the entire Ubuntu ecosystem. So it will be interesting to see how popular this becomes. But I suspect it will be a footnote in Raspberry Pi's history.
Yeah, I don't think that Raspberry Pi Foundation needs to worry too much about these things. I think you need to know what you're getting into if you buy something like this, and then it probably scratches a specific kind of performance or implementation itch that you know the Raspberry Pi isn't good enough for. Because you buy into the ecosystem, don't you? That's the great thing about the Raspberry Pi, is you buy into the millions of people asking the same questions on the support forums and all the software and all the projects.
But what I do like about this is the honesty. Pine say that you do need to have some sort of heatsink, and there are holes on the board specifically to mount that heatsink, and that they will be selling, I think, passive and active ones. Whereas the Pi 4, they sell that with no heatsink and no, they don't even mention that you need one when you clearly do need at least a passive one.
I've been running mine without one, and honestly, it's been fine.
Yeah, me too.
In a case as well, in a 3D printed case. It's the one I kind of built the little synth thing out of.
I love the smell of molten plastic in the morning.
Yeah, I think that at least you're not getting the performance that you could be if you had at least a reasonable passive heatsink on it.
Yeah, and you're right. And it doesn't need it. It doesn't barely push 10% of the CPU.
Ah, well, why aren't you just doing it on a 3 then? Or
yeah, just in case I need that extra synth sound, or I need to run a web server on it.
Yeah, run some containers on it or something. All right, so some bad news for Linux gamers, and that is that Rocket League is dropping support for Linux as well as Mac, but we don't care about that, in March. So you will be able to still play it offline and single player, but who does that? The whole point of it is that it's online multiplayer.
I take it that's some sort of space simulation game.
It's a football game.
Yeah, it's like you drive these cars around and have a giant football that you have to put into the other player's net.
Right.
It is actually a really good game. It's very addictive. And even though it sounds crazy, it's a bit like Sensible Soccer sounds crazy on paper, but when you start to play it, it's very difficult to put it down.
Sensible Soccer was a classic. Is that still going these days?
It is in Graham's house.
Yeah. There was a reboot of it, but I never played it.
All right. I used to play it on the Amiga. That was good fun. But the reason that they've given for not supporting it is that they want to upgrade to a newer version of DirectX, and they just can't justify porting the Linux version to newer technologies because they only have 0.3% usage on Linux and Mac combined, which really shows you how few Linux players there must be of this game.
And Mac users, just to put that in there.
Well, yeah, who buys a Mac to play games, honestly?
Who buys a Mac?
Well, who builds a Linux machine to play games, realistically? I know that it's like this whole thing and, Proton and everything, but if you're going to play games, just build a Windows machine.
Well, speaking of Proton, though, they did say that is probably the way to go. And the thing is, Proton works really well. I mean, I was playing GTA 5 on it before they broke the launcher, but that's unrelated to actually Proton. The game itself can work with a new launcher. I think you have to do some trickery. It's like swapping one application in and out. I don't know. I didn't bother. I wanted it to work proper. And that ran blazingly fast. And if you look at that was like a really decent game, a large game. And I don't, this could be the way it has to go. Like maybe Proton becomes like the way the Scum VM thing used to come for the old Choose Your Adventure games. What were they called? Oh, can't remember them. Police Squad and things like that.
I thought you were going to say Leisure Suit Larry.
Well, I think that actually might be one of them.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So,
all right.
Yeah. So, like, they used to write for a virtual machine to write the games. Like, maybe a Proton version becomes the sort of de facto standard, because if you could standardize to something, even if it is a Windows version, maybe it's not actually a Windows version. Maybe it's that environment. I don't know.
We've seen someone, and I think it was Epic, banning people that they detected running games in Proton because their anti-cheat system wasn't working properly or something. So
lovely.
I think I don't think it's just a case of being able to run the game. I think it's that they are actively hostile against anything that isn't Windows, presumably because they can't invest the money they need to make sure that platform is running in the right way. And I can understand the business impact of it, but it paints a bleak picture for Linux gaming.
I did hear, though, that the latest version of Wine might actually fix that. It's to do with the executable format or something.
Well, the good news is that if you've bought it and played it on Linux, you can get a refund. I think it's a bit of a ball ache to get your refund, but you can get one. So if you're outraged of the internet, then you can get your refund.
I think that really tells the story of how small the numbers are, that they don't mind giving money back.
Yeah, exactly. So something you put in, Will, was a Phoronix article about an incredibly cheap laptop.
Yeah, and it wasn't the fact that Ubuntu performed better than Windows 10 in the various tests that really amazed me. It was the price of this thing. $200 gets you an AMD Ryzen laptop. Now, it's a Ryzen 3 3200U, which is dual core but has 4 threads, and it's got a Vega 3 GPU on board, which is roughly comparable to an Intel 620 HD graphics card. So not going to set the world on fire, but reasonable enough. I looked at a few stats, and it will play some modern games at around 40 to 50 frames a second. So not lightning, but acceptable. But $200, and you can upgrade the RAM, and you can upgrade the hard disk in it. It just seems remarkably cheap.
But you do have to go into Walmart to buy it. So, swings and roundabouts. Although you can look at the cool guns they have there if you do.
The case it comes in looks pretty good. It looks okay. It's got a full HD 1080p screen on the thing. I don't have no idea what the keyboard's like, or what the connectivity's like, but I think it's got USB 3, HDMI out, and I think it might even have USB-C on it as well. So, a pretty nicely connected machine for a low, low price. So, yeah, if anyone in the US has got one of these, I would love to hear more about it.
All right, so Thunderbird is moving to its own wholly owned subsidiary, so it can start raising money that isn't a charitable donation and have some more autonomy. And the company is going to be called MZLA Technologies Corporation, so Mozilla, much like Mozilla. I thought they just didn't give a shit about Thunderbird anymore, but maybe they do.
Yeah, and I may have been cynical, me, after the Mozilla news we've been talking about the last couple of times. Is like, is this really to help Thunderbird, or is it, does it make it easier to get rid of it or to not take ownership over the project fully?
Well, it's kind of like sink or swim, isn't it? It's like saying, here, have your own corporation and, it's up to you now. We're not going to carry you anymore. But if there's enough people interested in continuing to use it and contribute towards it and maybe do some deals with companies who are going to bundle it or whatever, then it will live. And if not, well, it's not our problem. Maybe, but to me, email is a legitimate part of what the Mozilla Foundation should be doing alongside the web. I didn't think it was a bad direction for the foundation to be the custodian of Thunderbird, especially with all the other things it's doing. With Pocket, for example, Thunderbird seems to be a legitimate use of its finances and its energy. When are they going to fucking open source Pocket? That's what I want to know. Because they promised to do it, and the back end, as far as I know, is still not being open sourced. And that was years ago. And it seems like a useful thing that I would like to self-host, but They still haven't done it. I mean, I know how difficult it can be to open source things, especially when it's really shonky code or whatever. But they did promise to do it, and I'm still disappointed. Every time anyone mentions Pocket, it triggers me and makes me think, yeah, when are they going to do it, the bastards?
Yeah, and I agree. And also they make it a very prominent part of Firefox.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really use it anymore. I used to use it heavily, but then I just sort of moved away from it as a workflow. But I could see myself using it if it was open source, and people will say, oh, well, there's this, that, and the other alternative to it. But the fact that it's just there pre-installed with Firefox means that I would probably be more likely to use it if I could then hook that up to my own backend or whatever. But unfortunately, I just use Google Docs like some sort of freedom hater.
Get it out of here.
Okay, this episode is sponsored by DigitalOcean. Go to do.co/LNL and you can get $50 credit with 30 days to use it. DigitalOcean offers VMs, or droplets as they call them, with full root access in data centers all over the world with really fast networking and super fast SSDs. And they offer Ubuntu, Fedora, Debian, CentOS, and FreeBSD, and some container distros. But if you don't want to use one of those, you can upload your own custom image. They have loads of one-click apps like LAMP and LEMP stacks, WordPress, Discourse, GitLab, and it's really easy to set up. These droplets start from as little as $5 a month, and they scale all the way up to multiple cores and huge amounts of RAM and disk space. And they also have CPU-optimized droplets if you want just raw power, and memory-optimized droplets if you need more of that. They have really simple backups that have saved my bacon once or twice, and cloud firewalls that can stop network traffic before it even gets to your VM. It's really simple to add extra storage to your droplet, whether that is block storage or object storage, depending on your needs. So go to do.co/LNL and get your $50 credit. That's do.co/LNL. On to a bit of admin then. And first of all, thank you everyone for supporting us on PayPal and Patreon. It's very much appreciated. And if you want to join them, you can go to latenightlinux.com/support. And remember, if you pay $5 or more per month on Patreon, you can get an advert-free RSS feed. And if you want to get in contact, latenightlinux.com/contact. And another quick mention for FOSS Talk Live, I said it at the beginning, but yeah, it's going to be on the 20th of June, and we might start a little bit earlier. So if you've got any ideas for talks or workshops or something that we can do in the tiny basement of a pub on a Saturday afternoon, then do let us know. I will put together some sort of formal call for papers, I think, soon. I hear you've got something in the works, Will.
I've got 2 in the works.
Show off.
And I've got 1 I can do. So maybe we'll just do it an all Late Night Linux thing to start with.
Yeah, and I'll do some live open source music if no one else fills in the spot.
Excellent.
It sounds to me like you guys have got it covered, and I'll prop the bar up. Sorted.
Somebody's got to be on Triangle.
One of my favourite waveforms.
Oh dear. So some good news then. WireGuard is in the Linux kernel, or it's going to be, because it's looking very much like it's going to be in the 5.6 kernel coming up fairly soon. This has been a long time coming.
Yeah, and we've talked about it before. It's an awesome VPN that, Linus praised for its simplicity of code, which is an important part of it. And, we have talked a lot about it, but it is great as part of the kernel and everyone will just be able to use it.
Yeah, because it's not like your standard VPN, which has got like client and server. This is peer-to-peer. And so like both ends are almost equally, it's like the same config almost. Both ends is my understanding of it. Have you ever used this, Fainu?
No. Every time I have to use a VPN, it's usually to a client site. So it's going to be, Sonic Walls or Cisco's or something like that. And back here, I just use SSH tunnels and Foxy Proxy in Firefox. So I've got a whole host of SSH tunnels for various sites. And I just say, well, okay, if the IP address range is this, then use this tunnel. And it's remarkably easy to set up, and it's going to require an awful lot to get me out of using it, to be quite honest. So they have their challenge set.
Yeah, I haven't used it either, and I should. So maybe for a future episode, I'll see if I can set it up. I use OpenVPN here at home, to be able to use on my phone when I'm out. Yeah, I know, and that was a nightmare. So I'm fully aware of what a nightmare that is. So I can compare it to WireGuard.
Well, yeah, IPsec as well. Jesus.
Well, from the conversations I've had with people using it, it is infinitely easier to set up than OpenVPN. And so I'm tempted to give it a go. To be honest, if the filth ban had come in, then I would probably know a lot more about it by now.
Why do you think it got accepted into the kernel so quick, just in case?
But now the Tories are in with their massive majority, they might well do this filth ban, and so I'll probably learn all about it, but we'll see. But it's good news anyway that it's in the kernel. It means that we're going to potentially get some really easy ways to use it built into distros, because obviously you can configure it all manually, but really it's kind of more of a lower level technology that you could then build on top of, like really easy GUIs or whatever.
Yeah. And what's also really good is that, having set up OpenVPN, I really don't have any confidence in my skills to have got it right. So anything that can simplify that and make it, safeguard it against idiots like me is a good thing for everyone.
So as we talked about last time, Windows 7 is not getting any more updates, although it did get one which fixed, quite frankly, a non-issue as far as I'm concerned. I think it was like if you resized, if you had your wallpaper set to stretch, then it would just give you a plain black wallpaper. So I consider that a feature rather than a bug. But anyway, they did patch that in Windows 7, but otherwise it's dead. But the Free Software Foundation have got a petition, and that petition is for Microsoft to upcycle Windows 7 as free software. Good luck with that.
I think this is such a terrible, terrible idea, and not something the FSF should be going anywhere near. Let me explain my reasonings for this. Imagine if Microsoft did say, okay, Windows 7 is now open source. There you go, FSF, or whoever, Apache Foundation. There's Windows. Go for it. And sooner or later, a build would come out that allowed normal people to install Windows 7 onto their laptops. And Windows 7 would have this massive burst of new users. And Microsoft would give exactly no fucks about it at this point. All of the security issues that were discovered with it would still get funneled through Microsoft and put in the bin. All of these new users would be working under the assumption that they're getting some kind of updates because it's an open source project and loads of people care. No one will care. It will be bug-ridden around forever, and nobody will actually be maintaining it. I think the right thing to do is take it around the back of the shed and shoot it in the head.
I think they were trolling, and I think they damn well knew that they wouldn't ever get it, and I think they were trolling just to highlight the fact that Microsoft is not hearting Linux quite as much as it likes to claim it is, and it was just a nice way to get the old boot in.
Yet there's a quote here from the article saying, unfortunately, the FSF couldn't resist a final dig, saying the killing of the OS had brought an end to its updates, as well as 10 years of poisoning education, invading privacy, and threatening user security. May or may not have a point there, but that is not the way to win friends and influence people.
Yeah, they've actually removed that from the petition now, the FSF.
Have they?
They edited it and tidied it up a bit. Yeah, that was in the original text, but looking at it now, it's not there, yeah.
Yeah, and I also don't like the term upcycle because it just makes me think of an old sofa with something thrown over the top of it.
Well, I actually upcycled an old wine box once. I cut it in half and made 2 small boxes that we keep medicine and stuff in.
Wow.
And it's shabby chic as fuck. And I'm really proud of it.
Did you also sponge pattern paint it while you're at it? Or
I should take a photo of them, but then you'd see all the creams and lotions and potions that are in there. So I'll have to blur that out. Okay, this episode is sponsored by Entroware. Go to entroware.com, and they are a dedicated Linux computer seller based here in the UK, and they ship their computers with Ubuntu or Ubuntu Mate pre-installed. They have a huge range of laptops, from affordable ones which are ideal for email and browsing, all the way up to real powerhouses with dedicated graphics and even desktop-class CPUs in them. Almost everything's configurable with the amount of storage and RAM and what CPUs they have. And if you can't find something that's exactly right for you, then do get in contact with them and they'll do you a custom order. They also have a couple of servers and a range of desktops, including a small form factor machine and a really nice all-in-one. They ship to the UK, Republic of Ireland, France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. And if you do buy one of their machines, then there's a little drop down at checkout. You can select Late Night Linux and they'll know that we sent you to them. So go to entroware.com for all your Linux computing needs. So, Will, just before we started recording, you dropped a bombshell on us and you said you've had enough of macOS. You're going to try and install Ubuntu on your Mac.
Yeah, I just can't stand it anymore. I've tried. Honestly, I've tried to like it, and I just don't. And I was away at a company all hands last week, chatting to a few other people, and they said basically they had the same feelings that I did, that this was impossible to use. And why would anybody in their right mind want to stick with this when they could be running KDE or GNOME or whatever they want? So I thought, well, fuck it. I'm going to try and install Ubuntu on this laptop. I think it's okay. I spoke to a few people at work, and they probably shouldn't be saying this publicly, but they said, yeah, just reinstall it. It's fine. Nobody will care. So that's my approach here.
Maybe they don't like you and they're trying to get rid of you.
Yeah, we don't like that new bloke.
Who let the Ubuntu guy in?
Do they also ask you to get a bucket of steam from the fucking building site too?
I've got so many long waits now, you wouldn't believe it. Yeah, so I'm going to try and install Ubuntu on this thing, but I have absolutely no idea how to do it at the moment, and I'm a little bit worried about just breaking it, and then I really will be in trouble. So, yeah, any ideas?
I don't even know if you can break it, this being a Mac. I think you can even install macOS from the EFI bootloader through Wi-Fi.
Hey!
Yeah, my first thought would be if the SSD in it's not too big, and if you've got an old spinning Rust drive that's bigger, maybe just DD the whole disk somewhere safe. So if it all goes wrong, you can always try doing that. But my experience, granted with a very old Mac, is that you just hold down the Alt key, which they call Option for some strange reason. So yeah, turn it off, plug in a USB disk, turn it on, wait for the bong, then hold down Alt, and don't tap it like with a PC. You have to hold it down. And then you just get a boot menu, which gives you the Mac OS disk, and then it should be the USB disk, and then boot from that. And then really you should be good. I don't know about resizing the existing partition, though. I think you can delete it easily with gparted or whatever, but it's some funky file system these days, isn't it?
Yeah, and I've done this because I dual boot on my Mac. And it's Apple replaced HFS Plus with a PFS, which is a weird container part file system that contains encrypted partitions, but you can't access those partitions. So you basically need to use disk-util on the Mac to resize those partitions.
Can you do that live though?
You have to go into rescue mode, and rescue mode. If it doesn't have rescue mode and the OS installed, it'll actually download like a live version of Mac OS and you can boot into that.
Right. Okay.
And you can also do it from a Mac OS installer because you can get to the disk-util from there.
What's the current state of drivers for these things? Because I've got a Thunderbolt dock, which I need for Ethernet access, SD cards, dual monitors, sound, basically everything, because the Mac hasn't got any sort of onboard ports whatsoever. Are those things likely to work? I've never tried, because with my ThinkPad, I had a proper clunky dock and that worked perfectly.
There's only one way to find out. I've never tried to do complicated stuff like that. I think that's the beauty of Linux, though. You can boot it up live, can't you? And not even touch the SSD and see if that sort of thing is going to work before, try before you buy.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the right thing to do. I think my first step will be to try and boot off of a live USB stick and just see what happens.
What do you actually use on it? Do you just use a browser and a terminal and that's it?
Browser, terminal, code editor, a few applications here and there. But yeah, the usual stuff, exactly the same stuff as I was using on my Ubuntu laptop.
And what is it that's driven you up the wall to the point where you're going to do this?
It's the shell. It's the desktop shell. It's window management. It's hotkeys. It's moving between applications. Yeah, all of the usual stuff that GNOME was doing for me is just broken, and I can't stand it. And I tried to learn it, but what I ended up doing, as we talked about before, was downloading applications to make macOS work in the same way as GNOME, and it just seems silly. So forget that. I'm going to install GNOME.
It warms my heart to hear this.
I bet it does. The one thing is, though, that when I've set up a dual boot, and I've got a dual boot on my really old MacBook Pro, is that it will just by default boot into macOS, and I have to hold down Alt every time I boot it and get that menu, and then it says that it's Windows for some reason, and then you click on that, and then it goes into Linux. But it takes, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes to boot, maybe.
Yeah, and I've done it both ways. When I initially installed Linux alongside macOS, you have to go through the whole kind of partition blessing, and I didn't even use grub, so I kind of had it natively booting from the Mac's bootloader. And in that case, you can choose Linux from that same options screen that you get when you hold down the Alt key or whatever it is. And macOS, or whatever the equivalent of the BIOS is, will now remember which one you booted off last. But I now use Refind on that same Mac, which kind of handles all that for you, and it'll boot automatically to Refind if you set it up to from macOS. And there's Chameleon as well, which is another interesting bootloader for macOS and Hackintoshes that will work well.
Yeah, I've heard of that from Hackintoshes, but my experience of Hackintoshes has just been pretty negative. Like, you try and update something and it just breaks, and that's why I would just never bother. I'd just shell out the $7,000 or whatever it is for a proper Mac.
Well, I've run one for audio for a long time as well, and it is a real pain getting it set up. But at least Apple at least until recently used off-the-shelf hardware. I mean, for things like Thunderbolt, and in fact, I've got a Lightning connector to an audio interface here that works on Linux, and it also works on macOS because it's exactly the same chipset that Apple uses on the motherboard, and you can get the same motherboards with the same spec. So as long as you kind of stick as close as you can to the native Mac hardware, if this is something you want to do, it does work well.
Well, you'll have to report back on how you get on, Will. I don't know how I fancy your chances, really, because on my old one, it works perfectly well as long as you're willing to put up with that long boot time. But I presume that you just sleep yours most of the time anyway. So
I don't even do that. I just leave it switched on.
Yeah, leave it burning away.
Fuck the environment.
Well, my Mac's a 2015 MacBook Pro, and initially things didn't work. The Wi-Fi didn't work. The webcam didn't work. But that's why I'm a bit worried, because your Mac's much more recent, Will, and it could be that the drivers haven't been developed yet. But over time, everything has become compatible. So it may even take just another 12 months or something.
Yeah, and I've got a few hopes there because I'm using an external webcam that worked perfectly on Ubuntu before. I'm using the microphone and headset, which is connected via Bluetooth. I've got my proper podcast mic, which is over USB. And then it's the screens. So as long as the screens work and the network connection works, everything else I know works. So we will see.
It's just dawned on me that you're going to try and record this show on it, so you're not allowed. You've got to stay on macOS, I'm afraid. Right, KDE Korner then. Cute news, which is not great.
Yeah, a bit of an interesting one, this. So, QT, it's QT, I think, but anyway.
It's cute.
It's not. They have decided in their wisdom that you will no longer get a Qt binary of the libraries, and you will require a Qt account to do that. And it looks like that will have to be a paid-for account, which, from what I read from people, it's quite expensive to get. And there will be no more long-term support releases for that. So it looks like it's going to be pretty awkward initially to get going for a lot of projects, especially ones that use the LTS version of Qt to make money. The likes of Krita, for instance, which is selling it on the Windows Store, would technically breach that, for instance. And that kind of makes life difficult for them. So I don't know if the sky's falling in. I mean, there is a license for Qt, which they have an agreement that if Qt doesn't release any updates to Qt in the space of a year, then it all becomes BSD licensed, which is quite amazing. And the code itself is LGPL and GPL already anyway. So, they can't really lock it up as such. They're just making it slightly difficult for people to get hold of it.
Do you think this will lead to, a kind of a CentOS build alike of Qt, somebody trying to make a reproducible build of whatever they deem LTS.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't know if Qt will survive that, because from what people are saying is if everybody takes a copy and then that copy becomes the de facto LTS, then people are going to end up moving to that. And then they've kind of done themselves out of a license stream. So I don't know. What do you think?
My understanding of this is that they are only going to charge for the LTS version, and just with a free account, you can still get the binaries of the interim releases. But they're just trying to put up barriers and make it harder for developers to freeload, essentially. But it will be possible, but it's just a case of jumping through hoops. And I think that you're right, that a fork will appear. I think there might already be one in the works, I'm not sure. But that will basically mean that anyone who's serious about the open source side of things will just be using that, and you will get this splintering. I think it more likely that the Qt company will backtrack on this, and because they've tried shit like this before and backtracked. So I think that it's not going to be as big of a problem as people are making it out.
I think they've got a long history of it's depressing, really, because it's almost like a distrustful relationship with the open source free software communities. I mean, we all know, why GNOME started out in the first place and the troubles they had with licensing. And as you said, they had, I think it was like 2016, they had a load of proprietary modules, the charts and profilers and data visualization. And I think anything other than the OpenGL Qt Quick renderer were proprietary that you had to pay for. And it's also really expensive. And so they've never seemed to feel comfortable, or somebody behind the scenes is never comfortable with the idea that all of this is just being given away for free in the way that we always argue against when it comes down to open source. And this just seems to be yet another regression in their kind of in the backroom meeting rooms of power at the Qt company, which hopefully, because it already is free software, time will just tell.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to impact distros, because distros rarely use that LTS version of Qt. They always get the latest or several stages back latest and build the whatever happens to be the version of KDE that they're working on. And if you're using something like Neon or Arch, you're going to be well ahead of that point anyway. But I think it's the applications that all of a sudden, due to the various app stores that have kicked up, that are actually going to be the ones that suffer a bit. So I don't know. Yeah, I think, maybe, hopefully the backtrack happens, or maybe they're just trying to get bought.
Yeah, it seems like this is a reasonable attempt at a way to monetize people, commercial developers who are using the LTS version, and allowing the open source people, the free software people, to continue to use the bleeding edge for nothing. It seems like a reasonable attempt at finding that balance between how do we monetize the people who are ripping us off here, not that they'd use that word, and allow all of the community to continue to use it. But yeah, it's not perfect, but I don't know what more they could have done.
The thing is that we think of Qt as Plasma Desktop and KDE applications, but really where it's used most is on stuff like Windows with Krita and whatnot, because the number of Krita users on Windows probably dwarfs the number of KDE Plasma users.
Do you have stats for this? This is an outrageous accusation.
I would go further than that and say that the number of, let's say, automotive users, where Qt is the toolkit in your head unit in your car, probably dwarfs the number of Krita users and free software users altogether. So it really feels like those are the people that they're going after.
Yeah, and the likes of the Plasma Desktop and KDE applications might suffer as a result of it. But I'm sure that they'll find a way around with forks and stuff.
Yeah, I think they'll manage. I really can't see that being a problem. There's a lot of smart people there, so it might delay the move to Qt6, but hopefully not in the long run.
But there's some good news for KDE as well. They've received a donation.
A generous handshake, in fact, from the Handshake Foundation. Yeah, 79,000 euros, which isn't too bad. Yet I would like to add less than what GNOME has gotten up to date fractionally. So just putting that out there.
Yeah, so this Handshake Foundation make a habit of this. It's not cash though that they donate. It's not Bitcoin. It's some other cryptocurrency though.
Magic beans.
Yeah, magic beans, which you can sell, to be fair. I think that's what the FSF did. From speaking to someone at Linux Fest Northwest last year, they got, I think it was $1 million, and they just sold it as soon as they could and turned it into cash. So that would be my advice to KDE, but it's obviously up to them. But it's a fair donation, I suppose. It's certainly not to be sniffed at, 79 grand.
Absolutely not, and that'll help people get to various conferences and stuff, so that's good.
I think it'll buy them one Qt license as well.
Very good. Share that amongst yourselves, lads.
Well, we better get out of here then. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, and who knows what we'll be talking about then. But until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Phelim.
I've been Graham.
And I've been Will.
See you later.